Today's meditation is led by Hillary Stewardson for real. Kind of hard to put a meditation after those jokes, so. Okay, pay attention. Now please ensure that you are comfortable, and if you wish, close your eyes to better focus on my words. To begin, take a deep breath, hold for a couple of seconds, then let it out with a whoosh. And relax as your breath goes out. Now, another deep breath, hold, and whoosh. Now stay relaxed and enjoy the feeling. As we begin the new year, let us do a little soul searching. As we grow older, we tend to settle comfortably into our way of life. But let's take this moment to consider that perhaps, just perhaps, there are still dreams that you had that have not been fulfilled. I want you now to cast about in your mind and your memory and focus on an experience you would like to have in this coming year. Maybe it's a dream you had and you put it aside for some time in the future. Or it might be traveling to some country you haven't visited yet, or one you want to revisit. It might be volunteering to help alleviate suffering and hunger in a particular third world country, or here at Lakeside. Or it may be that you desire to take a long ocean cruise and enjoy the various ports, different cultures, and the camaraderie aboard ship. Maybe it's learning a new skill, like learning to play the piano, or guitar, or pottery making, or writing and publishing a book. You are certainly not limited to just one dream, but for now, please pick one special. Focus on your dream. Visualize yourself in it, living it, enjoying the experience in your mind and in your heart. Where are you? Is there someone with you? Are there any particular sounds or smells associated with what you are experiencing? And what are you feeling? Make this mind experience as real as you can. Visualizing doesn't just mean seeing a picture in your mind. Some people can do that, and others can't. But you can feel the emotions and sensations that go with your dream experience. You may be feeling a sense of joy, or a feeling of achievement or success. You're doing it. I will pause now for a few moments to let you fully absorb your experience and all the sensations that go with it. You have a whole new year in which to make your dream your reality. Make it so and enjoy. Now come back to this time and to this beautiful, peaceful place. Open Circle begins each Sunday morning with coffee, tea, and sandwich bites at 10 a.m. for socializing, and the presentation begins at 10:30 a.m. Gringo time. Thanks to Irene Anton for last Sunday's presentation. This Sunday, Cosmic Trends 2012, the tipping point. We are on the threshold 2012 of a momentous new era. Between 2011 and 2016, planetary cycles are manifesting as both evolution and revolution, and they're new models of everything. But I won't go into all of them. I would just like to introduce to you Barbara Schermer,
A passionate lover of the stars since age 10. She's had a vigorous astrological consulting practice since 1974 and is the author of Astrology Alive. She's asked me to read these 3 quotes before she begins. These celestial bodies are not to be sought by us outside in some other place, for the heavens in their entirety are with us, in whom the light of life and the origin of heaven dwell. That was said by Marsilio Ficino, philosopher and astrologer. We are made of star stuff, Carl Sagan. Not to be cut off, not through the slightest partition shut out from the law of the stars. The inner, what is it, if not the intensified sky, hurled through with birds and deep with the winds of homecoming? Rainer Maria Rilke. So may I introduce Barbara Schermer. Thank you very much.
Good morning. This is the 3rd January that I've talked about the transits of a year, but I've also done this for 16 years back in Chicago where I live. And what I do as an astrologer is I start looking at what's going on upcoming in the next year, really think about it and try to boil it down for you. Now, in the past, I always see people madly scribbling notes. So I decided to do it for you this time. So you have the basic structure and pieces of information that I'm going to be covering today. I also want to talk about our connection to the beauty that's here at Lakeside. We see the lake, we see the mountains, but not many of us know what we're seeing when we look up in the sky. And that's something that I want to try to cover here today. Let me give you the directions where we're seated. This is the east and the west, the north and the south. And in fact, we look almost directly south to the galactic center, the center of the Milky Way, where we are here. And right now, if you have a good night sky at your home or you go out someplace, the winter sky is fabulous. There's more identifying constellations and cool stuff to look at. So I invite you all to learn something about the night sky. I'm going to pass around, so there's 4 copies. I'm just going to spread them out, maybe that way. This is where the planets are right now. So we've got the directions. Okay, so here's the eastern horizon. The sign of Pisces is rising on the eastern horizon right now. Neptune and Venus are just coming up. The sun, as we can see, the sun is in the sign of Capricorn. So if we could see behind the sun, we would see the constellation of Capricorn. Right about up here is Mercury and Pluto. Saturn. Mars is just setting on the western horizon. The moon is sitting right about here, and we are on a full moon right now. So where the sun is, the moon is opposite. And it's 1:30 a.m. Monday morning. So today is the full moon time that they're coming exact. So the moon, if you saw it last night, the moon was fabulous last night. So the moon, when you see it tonight, is as full as you're going to see it. The planet Jupiter is sitting right about here, and the planet Uranus. Now, if you look up after sunset and look straight overhead, that's the planet Jupiter. That's that bright star that we can see right now. So I'm going to pass around, I've got 4 copies of a chart, just so you can see what a birth chart looks like. If there were a child born in Ajijic right now, this would be that child's birth chart. We all know what our sun signs are. I assume most of us do. This is what you read in the silly papers. But we have 9 other planets we have to consider in our chart, and that's what makes up your chart and your particularity. Thank you. All right. What is astrology? Astrology is the study of cycles and patterns that are hidden but knowable. To me, astrology is most like a language. It is not a belief system. When I hear somebody say, I don't believe in astrology, it sounds to me like I don't believe in Spanish. It is that much of a relationship and analogy. Now, when we talk about astrology, we're also talking about pattern recognition. So astrologers are always looking at the combinations of how planets are moving. And we have cycles of Pluto, which moves around your chart once every 248 years. Neptune, 165 years. Uranus, 84. Saturn, once every 30 years. Jupiter, once every 12 years. Mars, every 2 years. And then the Sun, once a month. This is also Venus and Mercury. And the Moon, which we can observe, goes around the zodiac signs once a month. It changes signs once every 2.5 days. So you can see we've got these big cycles, these mid-sized cycles, and then these small cycles, and then little teeny moon that's just working around and firing things off. So when you're observing these patterns and what has happened in your life on a particular transit or influence, if you observe what's going on, you got a pretty good idea what's going to come around the next time. Now, I've got a perfect example of this in my own life right now. The planet Mars in the sky is making what's called a square, a right angle relationship to my Sun and my Uranus. Mars rules explosions, unexpected happenings, accident-prone, fire, being impatient, being impulsive. Now, I want to thank Jim Spivey. Where did you go? This is an interesting story. My husband and I were up late Friday night until 2 in the morning, and at 8:30 in the morning, Jim Spivey calls me about something in the program. I grumbled a little bit because he woke me up. I went back to bed. I couldn't get to sleep. I smelled smoke. I got up and I looked around, and my laundry room was on fire. We called the fire department. They came very quickly. We kept our senses, my husband and I, but the fire was right next to a gas water heater. So I thank you for maybe saving our life, Jim Spivey. That's an example. Now, in my own life, I've followed this particular relationship. I've fallen off a horse and gotten a concussion. I've had a wine bottle fall on my head and gotten a concussion. So this is something I pay attention to. I was not expecting a fire in my laundry room. Now, astrologers look to the outer planets because they are the big cycles. And think of them as the deeper currents. So it's just like the deeper currents in the ocean. They're the ones that we do not see. They're right down at the bottom of the ocean, and the rhythms that we don't observe. We see all the surface movement. So when we think of the outer planets, that's what I'm going to talk about today. We're not going to bother with, there's a whole conversation more than what we're going to do today. So think of them as the deepest. It's Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, and Saturn. So I'll speak to each of them in turn. Now, we've all heard much about 2012. Both a lot of scary stuff, Mayan prophecies, things like that. And it's very clear, we live in epic times, more important than we believe. When we look back on these times, we'll say, when the historic moments happened, I was there. And better yet, and I participated. In essence, 2011 and 2012 is a tipping point, all right? Things can go either way here. Things are going either way here. And what's important to keep in mind is we have advances and setbacks simultaneously. So truly it isn't like the whole world's going to hell, although media would make us believe so. if you also tune in to what's good about what's happening, and there's a tremendous amount of good. I've listed some interesting sources for you to go to at the bottom of that handout. What we do know as astrologers, there are cascading events that are dramatically changing our world. Evolutionary leaps and revolutionary whirlwinds. I consider myself very blessed to be alive right now. I think that everyone who's alive has a purpose to try to move this whole evolutionary development that's going on with human beings in relationship to the earth and try to have a more positive outcome. So I think that all of us need to find personal ways in which we can start to be part of the solution and not continue, perhaps, to be part of the problem. So I feel, I'm a Kriya Yoga, I have a yogic background, and I feel that it is our spiritual responsibility, if we are still alive, to do something that's constructive, less destructive. Okay, first, very important thing to talk about. The planet Pluto and the planet Uranus are sitting at an angle like this. It's a right angle, 90 degrees. In astrology, it is proven to be times of a lot of conflict and stress. So, no surprise. This aspect manifests 7 times, which is amazing, through 2015. We're driving toward the first exact one on June 24th of this year, and then the last exact one is March 15th of 2015. Now, the last time that these 2 planets, Uranus and Pluto, made a contact point was in the last 5 years of the 1960s. And they were together, they were conjunct. How many here are baby boomers? A lot of us. Okay, do we remember what happened? Do we remember? What happened between 65 and 69? How about calling out some things? Say? College. Vietnam War protests. Vietnam War started on false pretenses. Does that sound familiar? Feminism, women's rights. Protesters. Time Man of the Year was the protester. Voters' rights, civil rights, sexual revolution, rock and roll, the Beatles, the Man on the Moon, the psychedelic LSD, mind-altering drugs to expand consciousness. Yeah, the assassinations, JFK, Martin Luther King, and Robert Kennedy, correct? Woodstock. Yeah, so, I mean, just listen to all the events that took place during that 4-year time period that were of a revolutionary nature. What was happening then, there's a different version of it happening now. There are now 2 generations that are driving this time period. And when we think of this time period, we would use the words evolution and revolution. It is children or grandchildren that you have between 17 and the age of 41. Who has children or grandchildren in that age range? Pretty much most of us, all right? They are more evolved than you and I. Every generation that comes on the planet kind of advances evolution. Now, who has children or grandchildren born 1970 to 84? Oh, wow, a lot. At least maybe 60 of you. This is the Pluto in Libra generation. What this means is, when they were born, if we would have looked at Pluto, it would appear against the backdrop of the sign of Libra. These are the millennial generation. They're called the millennial generation, and they are the peacemakers. They innately want to cooperate and find ways to share. And they're idealists, like my generation, the boomer generation was. And we remember, those of us that are boomers, when we were in our 20s, in the late 60s, how we were going to change the world. Peace, love, harmony were our mantra. And to some degree we were successful, and in some degrees not. This generation is as idealistic as we were. So hopefully we've set a platform, the boomers, for this generation to be able to take off and move forward. They are co-creators. They believe in co-creative leadership and cooperation. And they have a strong sense of justice and what's fair. And what are their issues now? Inequality, injustice, peace, not war. Now, who have children or grandchildren born between 84 and 95? Okay, this is the Pluto and Scorpio generation. I call this the Harry Potter generation. These are the children that grew up with this extraordinary mythic story that their whole generation read, embodied. And it's about growing up, and it's about being innocent and learning that there is evil in the world and how do you deal with it. And I assume most everybody's read Harry Potter. The lesson about light and shadow being within all of us. And having, the shadow's not just Voldemort. The shadow, Harry found out, was something that was internal that he needed to learn how to change. These are the problem solvers for our most difficult issues. So we have hope, frankly, that these two generations are pushing forward and helping us. If you've got kids in these generations, it's real important to encourage them. Now, Pluto is in the sign of Capricorn now, from the fall of 8 through spring of 24. Pluto is a twofold psychic process. It is death, endings, destructions, but it is always rebirth. Okay? So, you know, if you have things going on in your personal life and it just seems like, you know, how can I do any more? How can I take any more? The thing with Pluto is it always delivers regeneration. So you need to always keep that in mind. Pluto we can equate with a volcano whose source and pressure is very deep and hidden. But it starts pushing up as it gets more momentum. It starts pushing up, pushing up. Then if you see a volcano, it domes, poof, and then it erupts. And it destroys everything around it. But if you watch the landscape afterward, a couple of years, something like that, you'll see the renewed growth, the new nutrients put in the soil. So you see the renewed growth. Here's a quote from Justin Martin. He wrote about Frederick Olmsted, the landscape architect. It's a wonderful book. It's called Genius of Place. A quote from Justin Martin talking about Olmsted. When things were at their darkest, by ceaselessly casting about, he, Olmsted, was often able to find the first tiny marker, a vague idea, a general direction, something, anything, pointing the way to redemption. So let's talk about the Pluto-Uranus as having three kind of components: repression, resistance, and regeneration. Repression we see. So repression is all these dictators that have held down their people, brutal regimes, and they're failing. We're seeing how much they're failing because these old dictators are dying, or they should die because their structures don't work anymore. So we see this sense of structures and systems that are corrupted or ossified, that they're failing now. Multinational corporations that have no government regulation, they have kind of taken over our world. They're also under tremendous pressure from citizens like you and I. Voter suppression is another new one that's going on in the States. Now, as that repression gets heavier, the resistance is growing now. So the resistance is pushing up, and we see this with the worldwide Occupy movements that are going on. The Arab Spring is definitely the precursor of this energy of the Uranus square Pluto. Civil protests in China, democracy demonstrations in Russia, and recently the pushback on the Citizens United Supreme Court decision about corporate money in elections. The regeneration part is usually always messy. So we see the messiness that's going on, and it's occurring all around us. What is happening is we're creating more agile network structures that enable global networks to work in a new kind of collaboration. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, social portals. You see, if you know, what a strong role the internet had in the Arab Spring and frankly in every country. New kinds of civil societies are being built from the bottom up. So there's work around governments and systems right now, and people are focusing on solving problems locally. That's what we can do something about. There are institutions for global cooperation and problem solving. The Clinton Global Initiative is an example. The Gates Foundation is another example. They're doing amazing work with a lot of money behind them. Now, governments, how governments are regenerating, Egypt, Libya, Syria, however many more are going to have issues and problems. This next year in 2012, 39 countries are having elections. This includes the US and Russia, the National People's Congress of China, the G8 and NATO are meeting this year. For the environment, this idea of regeneration, we hear a lot about deforestation in the Amazon rainforest. You know, fairly mortifying when you see these news reports. Well, there's something we do not see in the news. I really am into environment, so I'm on different websites. And the deforestation that we believe is going on in the Amazon, certainly that is the case. But there's also reforestation. The Brazilian government in 2004 took on the loggers that were illegally logging in the Amazon, and the result of that has been a dramatic cutback in logging in the Amazon, and in fact, 80% of the Amazon forests are still there. In Africa, in Kenya, they have planted 35 million trees. In China, they have planted over the last 20 years 40 billion trees. So this is the other part that we don't hear about. In Germany, 20%, over 20% of the electricity is from renewables that are not in control of companies, but in control of citizens and farmers. These are great signs. Now, Pluto is in an Earth sign, Capricorn, and it rules over all manner of the environment, rules sustainability, and self-sufficiency. So the first question that I'd like to have you bring home and ask yourself, how can I become more self-sufficient? The first thing to do is to simplify. We don't need as much stuff down here as we maybe had in our other lives. Teach your children to love nature, and they'll take care of the earth. This is really important for little kids, because if they learn to love flowers or plant a little herb garden or something like that with grandma, they will learn to take care of the earth, and that's what this new generation, we want them to learn. Help your family be 50% more self-sufficient within the next 5 years. I think this is important. We're kind of seeing the strains on all kinds of resources and all kinds of unexpected events. I think it's smart to yourself and to help your family try to work toward self-sufficiency. Gardens, organic gardens, buying locally, contributing to co-ops, having survival things, anything like that. What I've heard, okay, I'm part of the Lake Chapala Green Group, and Don Aiken spoke at our group a couple months ago, and he said that per capita there are more solar homes in Lakeside than any other area in Mexico. We also have learned that the organic market, which is also one of my projects I volunteer at, is the largest organic market in Mexico. Now, Uranus in the sign of Aries. Now let's pick apart the other part of this. It's a fire sign. Started spring of 11, Arab Revolution, through spring of 18. So when we think of Uranus, we think of the word revolution. This is the era of the activist. And it is definitely a youth movement. When you see any pictures of people protesting, it's mostly the young people. Okay. They are the pioneers and the innovators. So their movement, which is now, because it's up north and it's cold out, has kind of gone underground, but it's going to come alive roaring in the spring all over the world, partly because of these elections, but partly because of the theme of injustice, inequality, and they've had the whole winter to organize. Now, Uranus in Aries is also time acceleration. How many of you feel that your life is going faster than it was even 2 years ago? Most of us do. Just as a comparison, right now, the Earth is spinning toward the east on its axis at 900 miles an hour. Now, the only way we can tell we're doing that is if you look at the sunset, and if you watch it as it's just about ready to go down. This happened 2 nights ago. I went out to look at the sun. Whoop! It was done like in 2 minutes. Right? That gives you an idea of what 900 miles an hour feels like being on the planet. There are new models of everything. Government leadership, energy, financial services, climate, education, technology. So for technology, as an example, we're building digital platforms and social networks. These are extraordinary tools. Let me give you an example of the new models of everything with science. I love science. I always have. I pay attention to astronomy sites and astrology. Here's examples of just recent news. They fired a neutrino from CERN. A neutrino does not have an electrical charge, and 454 miles away, it was received faster than the speed of light. It was like 20 millionth of a second. But the fact that they had an experiment that demonstrated that is telling us something about our models of speed of light. Here's another great example. In 1998, we did not know of existence of planets outside of our solar system. The week that the planet Uranus went into the signs of Aquarius was the announcement of the evidence of the first sign of a planet outside of our solar system. Now, this is what's happened in just the last 6 months. The beginning of June of 2010, there were 470 known exoplanets. The Kepler Observatory started downloading data, and by June 15th, we had 1,170 known exoplanets. Now we have about 2,800 exoplanets, meaning planets outside of our solar system. And 1,000 of them have been confirmed so far, so they're still in a catch-up process. This is extraordinary, and out of those exoplanets, there were 50 that they thought were habitable, inhabitable zone. It's called the Goldilocks zone. 10 of them they're looking at quite seriously right now, meaning that they're close enough to their star to be not too hot, not too cold, and have water. So, this is going to be extraordinary. It's a great time to be an astronomer. Just 3 days ago, there was the announcement of 4 new hot Jupiters. What that means is, if a star has Jupiter, a body about that size, it protects against radiation and comets, meteors, and so there's likelihood that there might be planets on life around a hot Jupiter. This was just something I read yesterday. SETI, the scientific investigation for terrestrial intelligence, received a signal. Quote, "This is the kind of signal SETI scientists would expect to find if an alien civilization is transmitting." Now, they didn't draw the conclusion that it was. It might be terrestrial, and they're investigating it now. If you're interested in this kind of revelation, the source is dailygalaxy.com. It's a wonderful aggregator of science news. Evolutionary leaps are taking place. This is also something that I read just this week. There is what's called a blue moon butterfly in Samoa that they thought was extinct. Last year, they found 1% male population. They went back, and this year, they found 40% male population. Scientists are baffled how it could have evolved in such a way, or reproduced in such a way, where they normally would have thought it would be hundreds, possibly 1,000 years to regenerate like that. This is an important point. The power of one. The power of each one of us here. I mentioned Time Magazine chose the protester for 2012, the activist, and that is all of us. This is interesting because the power of one goes back to December 17th of 10, when a Tunisian street vendor set himself on fire in a small village in Tunisia, and his situation went viral right away, and it was his act of courage and desperation that turned Tunisia over. Same thing in Egypt. If you look back to the source of some of these things that are going on, it's a single person. The climate conference that happened in South Africa didn't look like it was going anywhere until a Danish deal maker, her name was Connie Hedegaard, she was on the EU Climate Commission. She got them together at the end and strong-armed the US, India, and China to sign a binding agreement. I mean, it was amazing. It was one woman doing her diplomacy and forcing the three biggest polluters to sit down and make a binding agreement. In education, there's a Sal Khan Academy. This was a hedge fund guy, made a lot of money, saw that education was really a problem, and online, anyone for free can go and download 2,600 videos of math, science, history. These are examples. For what cause are you willing to stand up for? Where do you put your time, your money, your effort, your prayers? Linda Fossey, the realtor here, is she here by chance? Okay. When we had the crime last month, you know, she opened up her networks, got her networks going, and 1,200 of us showed up for that meeting. This is an Aristotle quote: "Where your talents and the needs of the world cross, there lies your vocation." Okay, so let's move on to Saturn, the planet Saturn. Saturn is in the sign of Libra right now. Saturn is an air sign. It's the element of air. There's fire, earth, air, and water, 4 elements. And this was July of 10 through October of 12, so we're in that time period right now. And as astrologers, you know, talking to my colleagues, this 2-year time period is the tipping point. When you think of Libra, Libra's up here on the board, it's the balance scales, right? And it is the requirement, I think, of all of us asking ourselves, how do I balance my own life? How do I find peace, equanimity within myself, that I'm not polarized either one way or another, that I'm sitting more in a balanced psychological and emotional state. Any of you that do yogic practices, this is the time to do them. Pranayama techniques, there's different techniques that are out there that can help us to stay more balanced. And then we bring a more balanced presence into the world by who we touch on a day-to-day basis. Libra is the sign of relationship. And all of us are reassessing important relationships in our life. The first one should be our relationship with ourselves and how well we do with ourselves in terms of peace on a daily basis. Then it goes to our partners. Then it goes to our inner circle, our outer circles, and our community. And the world. This is a very good time, if you're having a problematic relationship in your life, this is a very good time to get rid of it. Don't stop knocking your wife. And it's true. It's true. There are time periods where if you're hooked into a relationship that's problematic and you really don't want it anymore, this is the time to let it go. Chances are the door will shut and it will stay shut. So ask ourselves, in any situation we find ourselves, what is just and fair? Those are big words right now. Buckminster Fuller, the brilliant designer, who actually I took a class from at Southern Illinois University. He suggested a game called the World Peace Game back in the 60s. It has come to be, you can go Google that and you can find the contact points, but his idea was that the object of the game, it's a multi-level game with thousands of parts like armies and tanks and swimming pools and hotels and things like that. The object of the game is to make the world work 100% for humanity in the shortest possible time through spontaneous cooperation without ecological damage or disadvantage to anyone. Now, this has been tried out for a number of years on 9-year-olds in Washington, D.C. The game takes a couple months to play, and they're all assigned like finance minister of this country, they're, this make-believe tribe, stuff like that, and they're given 50 crises that are interlocking. So every day the kids come in, they don't know if their country's just invaded another country or not. And they have to figure out strategically how to get this result. So far, 9 and 10-year-olds at the end of the game have done it. They've done it. They've figured out how you can do this. I saw, I think his name is John Hunter, the guy who's really, the teacher who's running this in Washington. And he used an example of a young girl who was military leader of a small country. And she went and she invaded the big country next door and took a hold of all their military. Well, all the kids were really pissed at her because this wasn't cooperation. They were mad at her for a couple weeks until they found out that she had seen the vectors of where the game was going, and she knew that the large country was about ready to try to take over the world. She preempted them and took over their military so that would not happen. Okay, and the last thing I want to pick up on, I've got just 5 minutes left. Neptune is in the sign of Pisces, which is a water sign, and it's going to stay from February 3rd of this year, so just next month, through February of 2025. Think of this, Pisces is always associated with the ocean and the movement and flow of intuition and feelings. If we believe in other states of consciousness or other dimensions, the symbolism of this time period is that the veils are thinning, and there's more contact perhaps with other dimensions. Somebody here in the Globe Reporter saw UFOs. Did you read that? Yeah. Last week, somebody saw UFOs north here. It's like, I want to talk to her. I got her name. She's not here, is she? Now, I want to talk to her and what she saw. This is the increase of dreams and intuition. Meditation may be more successful, and there is a definite growth of compassion. Now, we may not see this from general media, which is owned by corporations and have vested interests in keeping us afraid and anxious, by the way. There was a Berkeley study that demonstrates we have a compassionate instinct. There is a persuasive argument that we are evolving for the greater good. Compassion is an innate human response embedded in our brains. Make room for your compassionate impulses to flourish. This is also alternate realities. The one that fascinates me personally are crop circles. How do these beautiful sacred geometric shapes end up in the middle of farms, particularly in one area of the world? There have been 80 witnesses that claim that they have seen beams of light come down, and that these crop circles are created very, very fast with beams of light. I mean, that's, our sense of reality is really getting distorted, and it's like, okay, what is the truth? What is reality? We have augmented reality now. An invisibility cloak, like Harry Potter wore, has been demonstrated to work. We now have offices in the cloud. Those of us that are online, you can put all your online material up in the cloud. We have injected nanoparticles that kill 80% of cancer cells. We have communication telepathically to computers. Chips have been put in paralyzed people's brains, and they can read, write, email, and video. We also have more instances of instant manifestation. I see this in my own life all the time. If you pay attention to your life, you'll see it. Let me just give you a very brief example. This was a while ago. I was in Chicago, had garlic, Italian food, was going up an escalator, and I said to my friend, I wish I had a breath mint. At the top of the escalator was a guy handing out breath mints. I went to my friend's cottage. I hadn't been there before. I walked in, and she had this very fancy cappuccino machine. I thought, she's not going to get my coffee. I wish she had a Mr. Coffee. I opened up the cupboard. There's a Mr. Coffee. So start paying attention, because those kinds of things are happening, even if it's a little thing like, I need a paper clip. Oh, there's a paper clip. Okay? Pay attention, because that kind of stuff is really happening. All right. And in here, let me make this my final point. Right now we're on the full moon, Capricorn, and the moon is in the sign of Cancer. Today, especially until 1 o'clock this morning, and as a general rule, this is an important question to ask yourself. Who and what nourishes me? Who and what nourishes me? Your answer to that question can guide you well. This is an excellent time then to reshape your life, to include the people who are supportive and loving of you, and also participating in the activities that are meaningful for you. Reshape your life to be fulfilling. And my final comment here, and I'll open it up to questions and comments. I went to an intuitive that comes down here from Laguna Beach. I'm very careful of who I put my hands into, as people should be. And she comes down here frequently, and she said that Lakeside was becoming a village of light. And I think it is because there are those of us here that have spiritual practice that really believe we can make a difference, that are contributing to the idea that this is kind of a light focal point in a way. Kind of makes me wonder why those UFOs were around if they were around. You know, were they attracted energetically to something that we're doing here together? Okay, that's all I was going to cover. And let's open it up for any kind of clarification or questions. And wait for the microphone, please.
Yes, raise your hand, to speak right into it. We have 2 questions right here.
Thank you so much, Barbara. She can also play a great game of bridge. In regard to being an individual and making a difference, many of you were at the meeting, 1200, most of us gringos, who basically were saying what is wrong with Ajijic. Well, I know Hector Mannix, and Hector Mannix mentioned that he was going, along with others, to have a peace parade on New Year's Day. I was part of that peace parade, climbed into the back of a truck with all Mexicans and a Doberman pincer. Got 2 beers, that was nice. I have never felt so connected in my whole life as I waved. And I waved to the children. We have an amphitheater down here on the Malecone, across from where I live. It is rarely used. I've had a dream since I've been down here. Half Mexicans, half gringos. No amplification. You sing, we sing. You sing, we sing. And we all know the power of singing. We shall overcome. Almost all the great movements have had singing involved with them. So I would ask you to get a hold of somebody, because every one of you does have power, to make that a reality. And always, always include the Mexicans. We live in Mexico.
In my bridge circle, I heard that Rosemary was the queen of the parade.
Others? I think right here, Jim, on the first row.
This might be a bit of a naive bit of a naive question from someone who doesn't know a lot about astrology, but the conclusions that you describe, where do they come from? And can you, I mean, if you're talking to a fellow astrologer, do they have the same conclusions? And who came to these conclusions?
We have mutual, think of these as energy principles. And astrology has been around for about 5,000 years. It is an empirical art. I think when you use the word science, then you have to go through all the, proofs and stuff like that. But from and to answer your question is yes, all astrologers, when they see Uranus square Pluto, have the same kinds of blogs, the same kind of information. We're all tuned into the same kinds of things. I personally am a more positive, psychologically oriented and spiritually oriented astrologer. So my sense is always trying to spin, okay, here's the difficulty. How do we turn this around? How do we really make use of that energy? So to answer your question, it is an observational art. That's the best way that I can describe it. And frankly, I recommend everybody learn astrology. If you learn about your chart, start paying attention to what's going on and what you experience. It will start to prove itself to you as a useful tool in your life.
I have one here.
Hello, I'm Ana, I'm Mexican, and I wanted to say something of these separations between Americans and Mexicans. Of course, you have been a lot of cooperation, but sometimes you need our cooperation too, you need the Mexican cooperation to come together in a crisis, in a time of a strong crisis, and it's going to be more. And we need to join forces as a human beings. Huh? So I think it's important to get more mixed with Mexicans in a way, no? We have both sides to learn from each other.
Let's go out.
Thank you.
Hi there. Quick question back to astrology. What specifically is the Pluto and Capricorn time frame? You were talking about death, rebirth, and regeneration.
Right, I have got that on the highlights. That's here. It's, yeah, you can have this one. Spring of 2008 through, I think it's spring of 2024. She asked the question, how long is Pluto in the sign of Capricorn?
Okay, back up, Lou.
Hi, if you don't know what time you were born, do your charts mean anything?
Yeah, they do. Hopefully you know what birth date you were born. Yes. Sometimes that's a problem, believe it or not. If you have at least the birth date and the location and you don't have the time, an astrologer can run what's called a sunrise chart. It basically puts the sun on the eastern horizon. You can still get about 80% that way, although having an exact time is really good. While you bring that point up, if you have children coming onto the planet or grandchildren, if you have someone in that delivery room or wherever the baby's being born, as soon as the umbilical cord is cut and that baby takes its first breath, it is the symbol of kind of downloading the cosmos at the moment. That's that baby's birth chart. Getting the exact time is really helpful.
I believe over here. No? Somebody, I thought I saw a hand. If not, I think we normally conclude. Oh, over here.
One more question.
Yes, the last question.
And just to let you know, this is the second week of January at Open Circle. We're trying to do this as kind of an introduction for you for the astrological influences of the year. So I guess I'm on the schedule for next year.
Okay, this isn't so much a question as well, it's a bit of a question. Is it reasonable, do you think, to ask groups like this that meet regularly to maybe bring their own cup and instead of having these things?
Yes, this has been brought up. This has been brought up time and time again. So yeah, if you can bring your own cup, that's certainly helpful. At the organic market, we're going to request that the vendors start doing biodegradable packaging. So, thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, Barbara. And if anyone wants to meet afterwards, we're meeting at Secret Garden on Hidalgo, the Indian restaurant.
The Open Circle has started something new. If a presenter would like to be available after the presentation and members of the audience would like to continue the discussion or questions, you are certainly welcome to join her. And Barbara will be at the Secret Garden on Hidalgo. And would appreciate your company. But wait a second, because
Hold on.
you know we wanted to tell you about next week. Michael Warren is going to talk about the Jesus mysteries. There are many similarities between the New Testament accounts of Jesus' death and resurrection and the ancient myths of the pagan mystery religions. He's going to explore the reasons for the similarities. So you could turn your cell phones back on, pick up your coffee cups and stack the chairs by color and style. We hope to see you next week.